Hey everybody! Jumping back into Wayside School Gets a Little Stranger. Chapters 17. 17. It's a 17. And 18. Let's get this party started. Chapter 17. Why the children decided they had to get rid of Mrs. Drizzle. Number 1. She was nice. I made cookies for everyone this morning, Mrs. Drizzle announced. Everyone cheered. Yeah! Number 2. She thought up ways to make learning interesting. I made 5 dozen cookies, she said. There are 12 cookies in a dozen, so who can tell me how many cookies I made? Joe waved his arm back and forth. I know, he said. Okay, Joe, said Mrs. Drizzle. How many cookies did I make? 5 dozen, Joe said proudly. Number 3. She was patient. Yes, I made 5 dozen cookies, said Mrs. Drizzle. I told you that, but how many cookies are there? 5 dozen, said Joe. But how many cookies are in 5 dozen? Asked Mrs. Drizzle. Huh? Asked Joe. How much is 12 times 5? Asked Mrs. Drizzle. Just a second, said Joe. Can I use a pencil and paper? Certainly, said Mrs. Drizzle. Joe took out a piece of paper and a pencil. He wrote the number 5 on the piece of paper, then tore it into 12 pieces. 60, he said. Nobody quite understood Joe's mathematical methods. Number 4, she was fair. Yes, there are 60 cookies, she said, and there are 28 children in the class, so how many cookies should each child get? Bibi raised her hand. 100, she said. You can't have 100 cookies, said Mrs. Drizzle. I only made 60. Make some more, said said Bibi. I made 60, said Mrs. Drizzle. I'm not making any more. Okay, Bibi said with a sigh. I'll take 60. We have to divide them evenly, said Mrs. Drizzle. How many cookies should each child get so that every child gets the same amount? John raised his hand. Everyone can have 2 cookies, he said, and there will be 4 left over. Can I have them? Asked Bibi. Allison raised her hand. Everyone can have exactly 2 1/7 cookies, she said. Very good, Allison, said Mrs. Drizzle. And John, you were right too. She gave everyone exactly 2 1/7 cookies. Number 5, she was a good cook. Best cookies I ever had in my whole life, said Stephen. Everyone agreed. Yeah. I got the recipe for Miss Mush, said Mrs. Drizzle. You did? Several kids said all together. I just added a pinch of this and a little of that, said Mrs. Drizzle. Number 6. She knew what a guzak was. Jason, would you please open the door? She said. Everyone gasped. What's the matter? She asked. You said the D word, said Dana. Door? Asked Mrs. Drizzle. Everyone gasped again. You're supposed to call it a guzak, explained Dana. Who said so? Asked Mrs. Drizzle. Mr. Kidswatter, said Dana. Mr. Kidswatter is a guzak, said Mrs. Drizzle. Yes, Mrs. Drizzle was smart. She was nice. She made learning interesting. She was patient and fair, and she even could make Miss Mush's cookies taste good. But she made Louis shave off his mustache, and so she had to go. So, that was chapter 17. They gotta get her out of there. Let's hop right into chapter 18. Here we go. The Blue Notebook. They had a plan. It all depended on Sherry. Everyone just hoped she wouldn't fall asleep first. Sherry often fell asleep in class. Come on, Sherry, thought Dee Dee. You can do it. Sherry looked out the window. The sky was full of big, fluffy clouds. She yawned. The clouds looked like giant pillows. Sherry imagined herself wrapped up in one of these clouds, soft and cozy. She pulled her blue and red overcoat snugly over her head. Her eyes closed. Then they opened wide. Was it? She shouted. Sherry, said Mrs. Drizzle. Look, shouted Sherry, pointing out the window. It's a hurry! Her long eyelashes stuck straight out. Mrs. Drizzle hurried to Sherry's desk. What is it? A spaceship, said Sherry, from outer space. On the other side of the room, Dee Dee dropped her pencil. She bent down to pick it up, then stayed down. Dee Dee was part of the plan, too. She had a dangerous mission. She had volunteered for it. She felt it was her duty, since she was the one who had brought Louis up to meet Mrs. Drizzle in the first place. You don't have to do it, Ron had told her. Mrs. Drizzle would have seen Louis sooner or later. No, I'll do it, Dee Dee said. No, I'll do it, Dee Dee had bravely replied. Now she crawled across the floor. Mrs. Drizzle looked out the window. Where? She asked. Wait, it went behind a cloud, said Sherry. What did it look like? Asked Mrs. Drizzle. Like a giant hamburger, said Sherry, but there was a zizzle stick hanging down from the bottom. Dee Dee crawled to the teacher's desk. She reached up and quietly opened the top drawer. She removed the blue notebook. Mrs. Drizzle stared out the window. What's a zizzle stick? She asked. I don't know, Sherry said very mysteriously. They don't have them here on Earth. Dee Dee crawled safely back to her seat. At recess, everyone crowded around Dee Dee as she went through the blue notebook. Louis once put a frog in Mrs. Drizzle's shoe, she said. Why wasn't her shoe on her foot? Asked Jenny. It doesn't say, said Dee Dee. There's a whole list of bad things Louis did, and he made it sound like Mrs. Drizzle picked on him for no reason. No wonder she put a trash can on his head, said Todd. What else did he do? Asked Eric Bacon, who was always looking for new ideas. But Dee Dee had already turned the page. There are other kids a lot worse than Louis, she said, flipping through the pages. What are you looking for? Asked Ron. I don't know yet, said Dee Dee, but I'll know it when I see it. She saw it. It was a note to Mrs. Drizzle from a girl named Jane Smith. Dee Dee read it aloud. Dear Lizard Face, guess what? I didn't do my homework again. Ha ha ha. And there's nothing you can do about it because you're too stupid and ugly. Ha ha ha. My family is moving away tomorrow and you don't know where. Ha ha ha. Rub a monkey's tummy. By the time you get this letter, I'll be gone. Rub a monkey's tummy with your head. Love and kisses, Jane Smith. Everyone was shocked. How old is that letter? Asked Myron. Dee Dee checked the date, then did the math in her head. Jane Smith wrote it 26 years ago. And look, said Ron, reading over Dee Dee's shoulder, Jane didn't do her last 12 homework assignments. After recess, Sherry saw the UFO again, and Dee Dee returned the notebook to Mrs. Drizzle's desk. Now all they had to do was find Jane Smith. Oh boy. Another new plan. We'll see how they get it going. all the kids on the 30th floor, they all seem to know what's going on. So we'll see if they can accomplish their goals this time of getting old Mrs. Drizzle out of there. Quiz below.